I am Aurora, 34. Let me say that again, because I need you to understand the full weight of what I'm telling you. My husband, the man I shared a bed with, the man who knew every sacrifice I'd made, every late night, every client dinner I'd powered through on 3 hours of sleep, the man who'd watched me build campaigns that saved our division when everyone else had given up. That man sat across a conference table from me, looked me in the eyes, and gave my promotion, the one I'd earned, the one he'd promised me, was mine to Hazel. Hazel, 26 years old, been with the company for 18 months. Nice enough, I suppose. Competent in that fresh out of business school way, where everything is theoretical, and nothing has truly been tested by fire. And now she was going to be Senior Vice President of Client Strategy. My role. The role I'd been building toward for 8 years. 8 months of work. Let me break that down for you, because I need you to feel the weight of it. 8 months where I didn't see my daughter's school play, because I was on a flight to Denver to save the Callahan account. 8 months where I missed my sister's birthday, my father's retirement party, my own anniversary dinner. 8 months of work that brought in 4 major clients. 4 clients that represented $32 million in annual revenue. 8 months of 15-hour days, of strategy sessions that ran until midnight, of proposals I'd rewritten 7, 8, 9 times until they were perfect. I had documentation for all of it. Spreadsheets, client testimonials, performance reviews that used words like exceptional and irreplaceable, and the backbone of this division. I had emails from clients who'd specifically requested me, who'd threatened to walk if anyone else handled their accounts. I had proof, mountains of proof, that I was the best person for this job, and none of it mattered. Because when Derek, my husband, my partner of 12 years, the father of my child, when he announced the promotion in that meeting, he didn't even look at me. He looked at the wall behind my head, at some point in the middle distance, as if I were furniture, as if I were wallpaper, as if 8 years of my blood, sweat, and strategic genius could be dismissed with a glance away. Hazel has shown remarkable initiative, he said. His voice was steady, professional, the same voice he used when he told me he loved me, now deployed to destroy me. Her fresh perspective and innovative approach to client relations represent the future direction of this division. Fresh perspective. Do you know what that's code for? It means inexperienced. It means unproven. It means young and malleable and willing to do whatever he asks, without question. I sat there in that conference room, the room where I'd presented the Meridian strategy, where I'd pitched the Campbell rebrand, where I'd literally saved our division's reputation after the Morrison disaster, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart, exactly. Something deeper. The foundation I'd built my entire adult life on. The belief that hard work mattered, that merit mattered, that if you were good enough, smart enough, dedicated enough, you would be recognized. All of it. Lies. The meeting continued around me. People were congratulating Hazel. She was blushing, doing that thing where she tucked her hair behind her ear and looked down at the table like she couldn't believe her good fortune. And maybe she couldn't. Maybe she actually thought she'd earned this. Maybe Derek had convinced her that 18 months of adequate performance was equivalent to 8 years of excellence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and slam my hands on that table and demand an explanation. I wanted to list every single accomplishment, every win, every miracle I'd pulled off, when everyone else said it was impossible. I wanted to make them see me, but I didn't. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, my face arranged in what I hoped was a neutral expression, and I let the rage build inside me like a pressure cooker with no release valve. Because here's what you need to understand. This wasn't just about a job. This wasn't just about ego, or ambition, or wanting a fancier title on my business cards. This was about survival. Derek and I have a mortgage on a house in Riverside Park, a house that costs $8,000 a month. We have tuition for Emma at Whitmore Academy, another $3,000 a month, because the public schools in our district are underfunded and overcrowded. And I wanted better for my daughter. I wanted her to have opportunities, to have small class sizes and AP courses, and a pathway to the kind of future where she'd never have to depend on anyone the way I depended on Derek. That promotion came with a $60,000 raise. $60,000 that would have meant security, That would have meant I could breathe. That would have meant I could start putting money away for Emma's college, for emergencies, for the possibility of a future where I wasn't constantly calculating whether I could afford new tires for my car, or whether I needed to make do with the worn-out ones for another 6 months. I'd bet everything on that promotion. I'd sacrificed my time, my health, my relationships with everyone except Derek and Emma. I'd put all my chips on the table, believing that the system would reward merit, that excellence would speak for itself. And I'd lost. The afternoon after the meeting, the whispers started. You know how offices, our information spreads like poison through the ventilation system. By 3 p.m., everyone knew. By 4 p.m., the speculation had begun. I heard fragments of it as I walked past the break room, past clusters of colleagues who went quiet when they saw me, their eyes sliding away with that particular mixture of pity and fascination that people get when they're watching someone else's life fall apart. Apparently, it was decided weeks ago. I heard she didn't even know she was being considered. Well, you have to wonder about the optics, right? The husband promoting the wife. That last one made me laugh. Actually laugh. Right there in the hallway. Because the optics of the husband promoting the wife. That was exactly what everyone would assume if I'd gotten the job. Never mind that I'd earned it 10 times over. Never mind that my performance reviews were flawless. That my client retention rate was 97%. That I'd brought in more revenue than anyone else in the division. If Derek had promoted me, everyone would have assumed it was nepotism. Favoritism. The little wife getting a boost from her powerful husband. But Derek promoting Hazel, that just looked like good leadership. Recognizing talent. Mentoring the next generation. The unfairness of it was suffocating. I made it back to my office. Not the corner office I'd been promised. Just my regular office, with its view of the air conditioning units on the neighboring building. And I closed the door. I sat down at my desk. And I tried to breathe. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking, actually, vibrating with a rage so pure and so complete that I thought I might shatter from it. I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk out right then, to march into Derek's office and tell him exactly what I thought of him, of his decision, of his cowardice. I wanted to burn it all down. But I couldn't, because quitting meant no severance, no unemployment, no health insurance. And with Emma's asthma medication costing $600 a month, even with insurance, I couldn't afford to be reckless. So instead, I did what I always do. I started working. I opened my laptop, and I dove into the Patterson account analysis that was due Friday, and I tried to pretend that my world wasn't ending. That's when I noticed the email. It was from Jennifer in HR. Jennifer, who I'd worked with on the diversity initiative last year. Jennifer, who I'd helped when her own boss was trying to push her out. The subject line was just a dash, no words, just a punctuation mark. And when I opened it, there was no message, just an attachment. A PDF labeled, Organizational Leadership Review, Confidential. I should have deleted it. I should have closed my laptop, and gone home, and dealt with my marriage, and my career implosion, like an adult. But I didn't. I opened it. And that's when everything changed. The document was a leadership assessment, conducted by an external consulting firm. Standard corporate stuff. Evaluating the executive team's performance. Identifying areas for development. Making recommendations for succession planning. Derek's section was 30 pages long, and buried in the middle of it, in the kind of dry corporate language that's designed to obscure, rather than illuminate, was this. Concern has been raised regarding perceived conflicts of interest in personnel decisions. The appearance of favoritism, whether toward family members or individuals with whom the executive has close personal relationships, can undermine team morale and create legal vulnerabilities. We recommend implementing clearer protocols for situations where personal and professional relationships intersect. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. Close personal relationships. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Was this about me? About Derek's hesitation to promote me? Because we were married? That would be one thing frustrating, unfair, but at least logical in its own twisted way. But the language was wrong. Individuals with whom the executive has close personal relationships. Plural. And the context mentioning it in a section about succession planning. About promoting Hazel that didn't make sense if they were only talking about me. Unless. No. I pushed the thought away as soon as it formed. Because it was ridiculous. Paranoid. The kind of thing you think when you're hurt and angry and looking for someone else to blame. But the thought wouldn't leave. It sat there in my mind like a splinter, small but impossible to ignore. I opened a new browser window and pulled up the company directory. Hazel Richardson. Started January of last year. Before that, she'd been at a boutique consulting firm in Manhattan, the kind of place where they pay well, but work you to death, where most people burn out after 2 years. I clicked through to her LinkedIn profile. Undergraduate degree from Cornell, MBA from Columbia, summer internship at McKinsey. All impressive, all very standard for someone in our industry. But then I noticed something. In her previous position section, she'd listed her time at the consulting firm as ending in December, the month before she started our company. Standard. But there was a gap. A 3-month gap between her MBA graduation and the start of that consulting job. That's not unusual. Lots of people take time off between school and work, travel, decompress. But something made me click through to her photos. And there, 6 photos down, was a picture from 2 years ago. Hazel on a beach somewhere. Tropical. Palm trees in the background. Sunset turning the sky orange and pink. She was wearing a white bikini, laughing at the camera. And in the corner of the frame, just visible, just enough, was a man's hand on her waist. The hand was wearing a watch. A very specific watch. A vintage Omega Seamaster, with a distinctive black face and steel band. The same watch I'd given Derek for his 40th birthday. I stared at that photo for a long time. Long enough that my screen went dark, and I had to move my mouse to wake it up again. Long enough that the sun shifted outside my window, and the light in my office changed from afternoon gold to evening grey. It could be a coincidence. There are probably thousands of Omega Seamasters in the world. It could be anyone's hand. But I knew. The same way you know when you walk into your house, and something's been moved, even if you can't immediately identify what. The same way you know when your partner is lying, even when their story is perfectly constructed. I knew. Derek and Hazel. The affair probably started before she even joined the company. Maybe that's why she joined Derek. Pulled strings. Made calls. Got her the interview. And for the past 18 months, while I'd been killing myself to prove my worth, to earn my place, Derek had been grooming his mistress to replace me. Not just in the office. Everywhere. I closed my laptop. I stood up. I walked to my office door, opened it, and looked out at the division I'd helped build. The open plan workspace, with its rows of desks, its glass-walled conference rooms, its motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. All of it funded by the clients I'd brought in, organized according to the workflow system I'd designed, staffed by people I'd hired and trained and mentored. And at the far end, through another glass wall, I could see into Derek's corner office. He was there, sitting at his desk, and Hazel was perched on the edge of it, both of them looking at his computer screen. Professional. Appropriate. But her hand was resting on the desk just inches from his, and they were both smiling. I thought about the past 12 years. Derek and I met at a conference in Chicago, one of those massive industry events, where everyone's trying to network and make deals and pretend that the hotel bar isn't charging $18 for a glass of wine. I was 22, just out of college, working for a small agency that couldn't really afford to send me, but did anyway, because I'd impressed the CEO. Derek was 28, already a rising star at Hartwell & Associates, confident and charismatic, and so sure of himself that I couldn't help but be drawn in. He pursued me. That's what it felt like anyway. Emails and phone calls, and eventually a weekend trip to visit me in Boston, where I was living at the time. He made me feel special, seen, like I was someone worth investing in. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, because Derek said he wanted it to be intimate and meaningful, not some corporate spectacle. I wore a simple dress from Nordstrom and carried wildflowers, and I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. Emma came 3 years after that. She wasn't exactly planned, but she wasn't not planned either. We'd been talking about starting a family, and when the pregnancy test came back positive, Derek picked me up and spun me around our tiny apartment kitchen and said this was the best day of his life. For a while it was good. Really good. We were partners. We'd talk about work over dinner, strategize together, celebrate each other's wins. When Derek got promoted to division head, I was the first person he told. When I landed the Callahan account, he took me to that expensive restaurant in Midtown and ordered champagne. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. I can't even tell you exactly when, because it happened so gradually that I didn't notice until it was already done. Derek started staying late at the office more often, started traveling more conferences and client meetings and leadership retreats, started looking at his phone during dinner, distracted, only half listening when I talked about my day. I told myself it was normal, that this was just what happened when two people built careers and raised a child and tried to maintain a marriage in a city that demanded everything from everyone. I told myself we were fine, but we weren't fine. We'd been falling apart for years, so slowly that I'd mistaken the erosion for stability. And now this, the promotion that should have been mine, given to his mistress, my professional life, and my personal life, destroyed in the same moment. I closed my office door and sat back down. I needed to think. I needed to plan. Because rage pure, righteous rage was burning through me, and I could either let it consume me, or I could turn it into something useful. I opened my laptop again and started a new document. At the top, I typed evidence. Then I began to list everything I knew, everything I could prove, and everything I needed to find out. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I was meticulous, methodical. Every moment I wasn't actively working on client accounts, I was gathering information. I started with the easy stuff, the professional evidence. I compiled every performance review I'd ever received, every client testimonial, every email where Derek or other executives had praised my work. I created spreadsheets showing my contribution to division revenue over the past 8 years, broken down by quarter, by client, by project type. I documented every major account I'd won, every crisis I'd managed, every time I'd gone above and beyond. The numbers were staggering, even to me. Over my 8 years at Hartwell, I'd been directly responsible for bringing in $147 million in revenue. I'd maintained a client retention rate of 97%. I'd mentored 11 junior strategists, 8 of whom had gone on to leadership positions, either at Hartwell or other firms. I'd won industry awards. I'd been quoted in trade publications. I'd literally written the training manual for our client onboarding process. Next to that, I created a similar document for Hazel. 18 months at Hartwell, 12 million in revenue, and most of that was from accounts I'd handed off to her when my workload got too heavy. No major independent wins, no awards, no publications. Competent work, sure, but nothing exceptional, nothing that would justify promoting her over me. But I knew that wasn't enough. Professional competence isn't decided in a vacuum. It's decided by people, and people are messy and biased and influenced by all sorts of things that have nothing to do with merit. So, I started digging into the personal side of things. I couldn't confront Derek directly. Not yet. If I tipped my hand too early, he could cover his tracks, manufacture explanations, turn the narrative against me. I'd seen him do it before. He was brilliant at corporate politics, at managing perceptions, at making people see what he wanted them to see. Instead, I watched. I paid attention in ways I hadn't before. Derek was careful. I'll give him that. At the office, he and Hazel maintained perfect professional distance. No lingering touches, no private jokes, nothing that would raise eyebrows. But there were small things. The way his gaze would track her when she walked across the office. The way he'd always take her suggestions in meetings, even when they contradicted mine. The way he'd find reasons to schedule one-on-one mentoring sessions with her, always late in the day when most people had gone home. At home, he was distracted, distant. We barely spoke beyond logistics. Who was picking up Emma? What bills needed to be paid? Whether we needed groceries? We hadn't had sex in 4 months. We hadn't had a real conversation in longer than that. I started checking our credit card statements. I told myself I was just being thorough, just documenting our financial situation. In case of what? In case I needed to divorce my husband. In case I needed to prove that he was embezzling company funds to impress his mistress. But I found things. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Always on weeknights when Derek claimed to be working late. A hotel in Connecticut. What business did he have in Connecticut? We didn't have any clients there. Jewelry from Tiffany, purchased in March. He hadn't given me jewelry in 3 years. And my birthday isn't until November. I took screenshots of everything. I created folders on a secure cloud drive that Derek didn't have access to. I backed everything up on a thumb drive that I kept in my desk at work. And then I made a mistake. I told my sister. Rachel lives in Brooklyn, works as a public defender, has a 6-year-old son named Max, and a wife named Keisha, and absolutely no patience for corporate bullshit. We'd been close growing up, but we drifted apart over the years. Different lives, different priorities, different parts of the city. But she was still my sister. Still the first person I called when I needed someone who would be unequivocally on my side. I met her for coffee on a Saturday morning, while Derek took Emma to her soccer game. I told her everything. The promotion, the suspicions about the affair, the evidence I'd been gathering. Rachel listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her mug of black coffee, her expression getting darker with every word I spoke. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You need to blow this up. I can't just." "Yes, you can. You absolutely can. You take all this evidence, and you go to the board of directors, and you tell them that Derek is having an affair with a subordinate, and using his position to advance her career, at the expense of more qualified candidates. That's not just unethical, Aurora. It's potentially illegal. It's discrimination. It's abuse of power. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen. If I do that, I destroy Derek's career." "Good. He's destroying yours. But Emma needs to see her mother stand up for herself. She needs to learn that when someone treats you like this, there are consequences." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that it was that simple, that I could just present the truth, and justice would prevail, and everything would work out. But I knew better. I'd worked in corporate environments long enough to know that whistleblowers don't get rewarded. They get managed. The board would be less concerned about whether Derek had acted unethically, and more concerned about protecting the company from liability and bad press. And I was the liability. I was the scorned wife, who couldn't separate her personal grievances from professional judgment. "I need more proof," I told Rachel. "More than credit card statements and suspicions. I need something concrete." "What? Like photos of them in bed together? A signed confession? Something that proves the professional misconduct. Not just the affair, but the way it's impacted business decisions. The promotion is the obvious one. But there might be more. Expense reports, client assignments, performance evaluations. If I can show a pattern of favoritism, of Derek systematically advantages Hazel at the expense of other employees, and at the expense of the company's interests, then it's not just about our marriage. It's about his fitness to lead." Rachel studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. What do you need? Do you know anyone who does forensic accounting? Or data analysis? I need someone who can look at the division's financial records and personnel decisions over the past 2 years, and identify patterns." "I might. Let me make some calls." We finished our coffee, and I went home, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not the naive hope that this would all work out without pain or cost, but the strategic hope that comes from having a plan. Rachel came through. Within a week, she'd connected me with a woman named Sophia Chen, who specialized in corporate forensic analysis, usually for divorce cases, where one spouse suspected the other of hiding assets. But she said she could apply the same techniques to looking for favoritism in personnel decisions. I met Sophia in her office in Queens, a small space above a dumpling restaurant that smelled perpetually of ginger and soy sauce. She was probably in her 50s, wearing a cardigan and thick-framed glasses, looking more like a librarian than a corporate investigator. I gave her access to everything I'd compiled. Plus, and this was risky, I gave her my login credentials for Hartwell's internal systems. I shouldn't have had access to all of it, but over 8 years I'd accumulated permissions that no one had ever bothered to revoke. And Derek had, ironically, given me administrative access to the division's shared drives when I was managing a major reorganization project last year. Sophia spent 2 weeks analyzing the data. When she called me back, her voice was grim. "You need to see this in person," she said. I went back to her office after work on a Tuesday. She had printouts spread across every available surface charts and graphs and highlighted spreadsheets that looked like something from a crime procedural. "This is bad," she said, without preamble. Like, really bad. Not just unethical, potentially criminal. She walked me through it, step by step. First, the personnel decisions. Over the 18 months since Hazel had joined Hartwell, she'd received 3 raises totaling $42,000 more than any other employee at her level. She'd been assigned to the highest profile, highest revenue clients, the ones that would look best on a resume and create the fastest path to promotion, and other employees, more experienced, more qualified employees, had been systematically passed over for opportunities that went to Hazel instead. But that was just the beginning. Sophia had also found irregularities in expense reports. Derek had approved tens of thousands of dollars in expenses for Hazel that didn't quite add up. Client dinners with no client. Travel to cities where Hartwell had no active business. Conference registrations that Sophia couldn't find any record of her actually attending. And then there were the timeline gaps. Days when both Derek and Hazel had been out of the office at the same time. Their calendars blocked with vague meetings that had no documentation, no follow-up, no paper trail. "Here's the thing," Sophia said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "If this was just an affair, that's messy, but it's personal. But your husband has been using company resources to fund this relationship, and he's been making personnel and business decisions based on his personal interests rather than the company's interests. That's breach of fiduciary duty. If Hartwell is publicly traded, it could even be securities fraud misleading the company about the basis for strategic decisions." I stared at the numbers, my heart pounding. "Can you prove all of this?" "I can show the pattern. Whether it's enough to prove intent, that's a question for lawyers. But Aurora," she looked at me over her glasses, "this isn't just about getting your promotion. If you release this information, you're going to destroy your husband's career, probably end your marriage. There's going to be an investigation, maybe legal action. It's going to be ugly, and public, and painful. I know. Are you sure you want to do this? Because once you start, you can't unring this bell." I thought about Emma, about the college fund I'd been trying to build, about the mortgage and the tuition, and the life we'd constructed that was built on lies. I thought about every late night I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd chosen to prove myself through merit instead of politics. I thought about Hazel, 26, and ambitious, getting opportunities handed to her that I'd had to fight and bleed for. And I thought about every other woman at Hartwell, and at companies like Hartwell, who work twice as hard for half the recognition, who watched less qualified men and women sleeping with powerful men get promoted ahead of them. "I'm sure," I said. But I didn't go to the board. Not yet. Because Sophia was right. If I just dumped all of this evidence on them, it would create chaos, but it wouldn't necessarily create the outcome I wanted. Boards are conservative institutions. They protect themselves first, the company second, and employees a distant third. If I wanted real change, I needed leverage, I needed allies, and I needed a narrative that was about more than just my personal grievances. So I started building coalitions. I began with Jennifer in HR, the person who'd sent me that initial document. We met for lunch at a restaurant far enough from the office that we wouldn't run into colleagues. "I need to know why you sent me that leadership review," I said. Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "I shouldn't have. It was a violation of confidentiality protocols. But you did anyway. Why?" She was quiet for a moment, pushing her salad around her plate. Then she said, "Because I've been watching what's happening, and it's wrong. You're the best strategist in that division, maybe in the whole company. Everyone knows it. And watching Derek pass you over for someone who's barely out of grad school, it made me sick. Did you know about the affair?" I suspected. There were signs. Nothing definitive, but enough that I started paying attention. "Has anyone filed a complaint?" "No. But if they did, what would happen? Derek is the head of the division. He's friends with half the executive team. Who's going to believe an affair accusation from a junior employee? It would just look like sour grapes. What if the accusation came with evidence? Financial evidence, pattern evidence, proof that this wasn't just an affair, but a systematic abuse of power." Jennifer looked at me sharply. "Do you have that?" "I might. If I did, What would be the right way to present it? She thought about it. Not HR. We're not investigators. And we're not empowered to act against executives without board approval. You'd need to go to the ethics committee that's board members, not staff. But you need to be careful about how you frame it. If it looks like a personal vendetta, they'll dismiss it. You need to make it about company risk, about liability, about protecting Hartwell's reputation. We talked for another hour. Jennifer agreed to help me, carefully, within the bounds of what she could do without losing her own job. She couldn't give me direct access to more confidential documents, but she could point me toward policies and precedents, toward other cases where executives had been investigated for conflicts of interest. Next, I reached out to Grace Palmer, another senior strategist in our division. Grace was in her 40s, had been with Hartwell for 12 years, and was one of the most respected voices in the company. She'd also been passed over for promotion twice, despite her exceptional track record. We met for coffee, and I was direct. How do you feel about the fact that Hazel got promoted over both of us? Grace's smile was tight. How do you think I feel? Angry, frustrated, probably wondering what the point is of working this hard. If merit doesn't matter. All of the above. I leaned forward. What if I told you that the promotion wasn't just unfair, but potentially illegal? That Derek has been systematically favoring Hazel in ways that violate company policy and possibly securities law? Grace's eyes widened. Can you prove it? I'm working on it, but I need to know if I move forward with this, if I take it to the board. Are you willing to back me up? To add your voice to the complaint? Not? She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Over the next 2 weeks, I had similar conversations with 4 other colleagues, people who'd been marginalized, passed over, whose talent and hard work had been subordinated to Derek's personal agenda. All of them agreed to support a formal complaint if I could make the case. I also started quietly reaching out to clients, not to air dirty laundry that would be unprofessional and would hurt my own credibility, but just to maintain relationships, to remind them that I was the one who'd built their campaigns, who understood their needs, who'd delivered results, because I knew what was coming, and when it happened, I needed to make sure the clients stayed loyal to me, not to Hartwell. Finally, I went to see a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer. Not yet. But an employment lawyer, who specialized in discrimination and whistleblower cases. Her name was Patricia Moreno, and her office was in a high-rise in Midtown with a view of the Hudson River. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. You have a strong case for gender discrimination. You were passed over for promotion, in favor of a less qualified candidate, and there's evidence that the decision was based on factors other than merit. The affair, if you can prove it, strengthens that case significantly. What about the financial irregularities? That's trickier. You're not a forensic accountant, and you obtained some of this information through means that could be considered questionable. The company could argue that you violated confidentiality policies, access systems you weren't authorized to use, but the information is real. The pattern exists. I believe you, but in court, how you obtain the evidence matters almost as much as what the evidence shows. We'd need to be strategic about how we present this. What do you recommend? Patricia thought for a moment. First, document everything that happens from this point forward. Every interaction with Derek, every meeting, every performance review. If there's retaliation, and there probably will be, we need to be able to show the pattern. Second, file a formal internal complaint with the ethics committee. Use the information you have, but frame it carefully. Focus on what you observed directly. What's in official records? What can be corroborated by other employees? Don't make accusations you can't prove. And third, she paused. Third, be prepared for this to get very ugly. If Derek feels threatened, he's going to fight back. He has more power in the organization than you do. More allies, more resources. You need to be sure you're ready for that fight. I'm ready. But I wasn't. Not really. Because I'd been so focused on the professional side of this, on gathering evidence, and building coalitions, and preparing my case, that I'd almost forgotten about the personal reality. I was still going home to Derek every night, still sitting across the dinner table from him while Emma talked about her day at school, still sleeping in the same bed. Though we stayed on opposite sides now. The space between us. A chasm. It was torture. Looking at him and seeing a stranger. Watching him text on his phone and wondering if he was messaging her. Listening to him talk about work. And wanting to scream that I knew. That I'd figured it out. That he couldn't keep lying to me. But I held it together. I kept my face neutral. And my voice calm. And I played the role of the supportive wife, while I built my case against him. Until the night I couldn't anymore. It was a Thursday in late September. Emma was at a sleepover at her friend Madison's house. Derek came home late, after 9, smelling like bourbon and expensive perfume. "Client dinner," he said, not meeting my eyes, as he hung up his coat. "Which client?" "Callahan." Jeff wanted to discuss the Q4 strategy. Jeff Callahan was 62 years old, and happily married to a woman who wore Chanel No. 5, not the modern floral scent that was currently radiating off my husband. "That's interesting," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body, because I talked to Jeff this afternoon, and he said he was having dinner at home with his grandkids. Derek froze. For just a second, his mask slipped, and I saw panic in his eyes. Then he recovered. I misspoke. It was a different client. "I'm tired, Aurora. I've had a long day." "Was it Hazel?" Silence. The air in our apartment felt pressurized, like before a storm. "Were you having dinner with Hazel?" "We had a working session. She's still learning some of the more complex client management strategies. And I thought, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't insult me by pretending this is about mentorship. I don't know what you think is happening. I know about the affair, Derek. I know you've been sleeping with her. I know you promoted her over me because of your relationship with her. I know about the expenses, the hotels, the jewelry. I know everything." His face went white, then red, then settled into something hard and cold. "You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. You went through my personal things, my credit cards. That's a violation of what? Our marriage vows? Because I'm pretty sure you violated those first." We stood there in our kitchen, the granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances that we'd chosen together during the renovation 3 years ago, and I watched 12 years of marriage crumble into dust. "How long?" I asked. "Aurora, how long have you been sleeping with her?" He sighed, ran his hand through his hair. 2 years. A little more. 2 years. Emma had been 9 years old. We'd still been going to marriage counseling, trying to reconnect, after what Derek had called a rough patch. I'd thought we were fixing things. Apparently, he'd been fixing them by starting an affair with a woman 15 years younger than me. And the promotion. She earned it. I actually laughed at that. She earned it. 18 months versus my 8 years. And she earned it. She brings a fresh perspective. New energy. The division needs that. The division needs someone who can actually do the job. Someone who's proven themselves. Someone who's brought in $147 million in revenue. This isn't just about numbers, Aurora. It's about vision, leadership, the ability to inspire people, and drive innovation. It's about you wanting to fuck your 26-year-old girlfriend and give her a fancy title so she feels important. Derek's expression hardened. "I don't have to explain my business decisions to you. Actually, you do. You have to explain them to the board, to the ethics committee, to the lawyers who are going to be very interested in how you've been using company resources to fund your affair. Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you. I've filed a formal complaint with the ethics committee. I've documented everything. The favoritism, the financial irregularities, the systematic discrimination. And I'm not the only one. 5 other employees are supporting the complaint. The board is going to investigate. And when they do, they're going to find exactly what I found." For the first time, Derek looked genuinely afraid. "You're going to destroy my career. You destroyed mine first. I'm Emma's father. If you do this, you're not just hurting me. You're hurting our daughter, her stability, her future." And there it was. The weapon I'd known he'd use. The guilt card. The reminder that any damage I did to him would ripple out to Emma. But I was ready for it. Emma deserves to grow up knowing that integrity matters. That when someone treats you unfairly, you don't just accept it. You fight back. You stand up for yourself, and for what's right. That's the lesson I'm teaching her. What lesson are you teaching by lying and cheating and abusing your power? Derek didn't have an answer for that. I slept in Emma's room that night. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. The ethics investigation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of testimony and document review and interviews with everyone in the division. 6 weeks of watching Derek squirm as his carefully constructed facade crumbled. 6 weeks of whispers in the hallways. And speculation in the break room. And my name in everyone's mouth. It was brutal. Some people supported me. Grace, Jennifer, the other colleagues who'd signed on to the complaint. They saw what I was doing as necessary. As brave. But others saw me as vindictive. As a woman who couldn't separate her personal problems from her professional responsibilities. As someone who was using corporate mechanisms to wage a war against her cheating husband. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Maybe my motives weren't pure. Maybe I wanted Derek to suffer. Wanted him to experience the same humiliation and powerlessness that I'd felt. But that didn't make the evidence less real. It didn't make his actions less wrong. The board's final report was damning. They found that Derek had violated multiple company policies regarding conflicts of interest, expense reporting, and fair personnel practices. They found that his relationship with Hazel had created an appearance of impropriety that had damaged morale and potentially exposed the company to legal liability. They offered him a choice. Resign quietly with a severance package and a carefully worded press release about pursuing other opportunities, or be terminated for cause. He resigned. Hazel was also asked to leave. Not fired, they couldn't prove that she'd done anything explicitly wrong beyond having an affair with her boss, but encouraged to pursue opportunities elsewhere. She was gone within a week. And me? I was offered the promotion, Senior Vice President of Client Strategy, the role I'd earned 3 times over. I turned it down, because here's what I'd learned during those 6 weeks. I didn't want to work at a company where I'd had to wage war to be recognized, where my merit had only been acknowledged after I'd forced them to see it, after I'd threatened them with legal action and bad press. I wanted to work somewhere that valued me from the beginning, somewhere that would see my talent and reward it without me having to burn everything down first. So instead, I reached out to Meridian Group. They were Hartwell's biggest competitor, and I'd actually been approached by their CEO, Marcus Chen, 2 years earlier, about joining their team. I'd turned him down then, because I was loyal to Hartwell, because Derek had convinced me that my future was there. But things had changed. I met Marcus for coffee, and I was honest with him. I told him about the investigation, about the complaint, about why I was leaving Hartwell. I didn't trash talk Derek. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves, but I wanted Marcus to know exactly what he was getting, if he hired me. "You're telling me," Marcus said, stirring his espresso, "that you just took down a division head at one of our biggest competitors because he was corrupt, and now you want to bring your talents to us?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," he smiled. "When can you start?" But before I could move forward, I had to deal with the wreckage of my personal life. The divorce was ugly. Derek fought me on everything. Custody, assets, support. He wanted to keep the house. He wanted primary custody of Emma. He wanted to pay as little as possible in spousal support, despite the fact that he'd been the higher earner throughout our marriage, and I'd sacrificed career opportunities to support his advancement. We ended up in mediation, both of us with expensive lawyers, fighting over the pieces of the life we'd built together. In the end, I got joint custody of Emma, enough spousal and child support to maintain some stability, and a 50% stake in the house, with the agreement that we'd sell it within a year and split the proceeds. It wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd wanted to keep the house, to give Emma continuity and stability, but I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. Not yet. And Derek refused to be the one to move out. So we sold it. The beautiful house in Riverside Park, with its high ceilings and original hardwood floors, and the garden where Emma had learned to ride her bike. We sold it to a young couple with a baby, and I tried not to cry as I watched them walk through rooms that still held the ghosts of my family. Emma took it hard. She was 11 by then, old enough to understand that her father had done something wrong, but not quite old enough to process all the implications. She was angry at both of us, angry at Derek for the affair, angry at me for blowing up our family. "Why couldn't you just forgive him?" she asked me one night, as we sat in our new apartment in Brooklyn. It was smaller than the house, less prestigious, but it was ours, mine and Emma's, and no one could take it from us. Because forgiveness without accountability isn't really forgiveness. I told her. It's just enabling. Daddy did something that wasn't just wrong morally, but wrong professionally. He abused his power. He hurt people, not just me, but other people at his company, who were doing good work and not getting recognized for it. But you could have handled it privately. You didn't have to go to the board. If I'd handled it privately, nothing would have changed. Daddy would still be in his position, still making the same kinds of decisions. Other people would continue to be hurt. Sometimes you have to make things public to make them right. Did it make things right? And that was the question, wasn't it? Had any of this made things right? I thought about my new job at Meridian, about the corner office, with the view of the Manhattan skyline, about the team I was building, the clients I was winning, the culture I was trying to create where merit actually mattered. I thought about Grace, who'd left Hartwell too, and was now thriving at a startup, about Jennifer, who'd been promoted to head of HR after the investigation led to a wider review of company practices. I thought about the new policies Hartwell had implemented, clearer protocols around conflicts of interest, mandatory training on bias and favoritism, an anonymous reporting system for ethics concerns. None of it brought back the years I'd lost. None of it erased the pain and humiliation of being passed over, of discovering my husband's betrayal, of having my personal life become office gossip. But it changed things. It made space for the next woman, who worked twice as hard, and wondered why she wasn't getting ahead. It created accountability, where there had been none. I think so, I told Emma. I think it made things more right than they were before. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. And over time, she came to understand. Not immediately. It took years, honestly, for her to fully process what had happened and why I'd made the choices I did. But she saw me build my career at Meridian, saw me get promoted to Executive Vice President, then to Chief Strategy Officer, saw me earn those titles through work that spoke for itself, not through politics or connections or sleeping with the right people. And she saw me mentor other women. I made that a priority, finding talented young professionals and helping them navigate the corporate landscape, teaching them to document their wins, to negotiate fearlessly, to recognize when they were being undervalued, and to do something about it. One of those women was Grace Martinez, a 24-year-old analyst, who reminded me painfully of my younger self, brilliant and hardworking, and naive about how the game was really played. I took her under my wing, taught her everything I'd learned, and watched her flourish. Emma saw all of that, and when she was applying to colleges, she wrote her application essay about integrity and accountability, about watching her mother stand up to power, even when it cost her everything. She got into Stanford. I'm telling you all of this now, the whole messy, painful, triumphant story, because I want you to know that you're not alone. If you've ever felt overlooked for a promotion you deserved, if you've ever watched someone less qualified get ahead because of politics or nepotism, or who they're sleeping with, if you've ever wondered whether merit actually matters in this world, I see you. I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to work yourself to exhaustion and still not be enough. I know the rage that comes from being invisible, despite your excellence. And I want you to know that you have options, that you can fight back, that it won't be easy, and it won't be clean, and you might lose things you value in the process. But on the other side of that fight is the possibility of building something better, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. 3 years after I left Hartwell, I was invited to speak at a Women in Business conference. The keynote stage, 3,000 people in the audience, my name on the massive screen behind me. I told my story. Not all of it. Some wounds are too private to share publicly. But the core of it, the promotion I was denied, the investigation, the choice to leave and rebuild somewhere that valued me. When I finished, the applause was deafening. But what I remember most wasn't the applause. It was the line of women who came up to me afterwards, one by one, to tell me their own stories. The promotions they'd been denied, the credit they'd been robbed of, the ways they'd been marginalized and dismissed, and made to feel like they were crazy for thinking they deserved better. And I told each of them the same thing. Document everything. Build your coalition. Know your worth. And when you're ready, fight. Because merit matters. Ethics matter. Integrity matters. But they don't enforce themselves. They require people who are willing to stand up, and demand that the systems we work in actually live up to their stated values. It's been 8 years now since I walked into that promotion meeting and watched Derek hand my job to Hazel. 8 years since my world fell apart, and I had to rebuild it from scratch. I'm 42 now, Chief Strategy Officer at Meridian Group, one of the most respected firms in our industry. I've been profiled in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. I've built a team of 30 people who are changing how we think about client relations and corporate strategy. Emma is 19, home from Stanford for the summer, working as an intern at a non-profit that advocates for workplace equity. She tells me she's proud of me, that she understands now why I made the choices I did. Derek is. I don't actually know where Derek is, and I don't care. Last I heard, he was at a smaller firm somewhere, doing adequately, but not spectacularly. Hazel married someone else and moved to California. My life has moved on in ways that don't include either of them. Rachel and I are close again. She helped me through the worst of the divorce, and I helped her when she was going through her own career crisis. We have dinner every Sunday with our kids, and we talk about work and life and the ways the world is changing, slowly but surely. And I mentor. That's become the most important part of my work, honestly. I have a formal mentorship program at Meridian, but I also mentor women outside the company, young professionals who reach out because they've read my story, or heard me speak, or just need someone who understands what they're going through. I teach them how to build their cases, how to document their worth, how to negotiate from a position of strength, how to recognize when a situation is salvageable, and when it's time to walk away. And I teach them that anger, righteous anger, at injustice, is not something to be ashamed of. It's fuel. It's energy. It can be destructive if you let it consume you. But if you channel it into strategy, into action, into building something better, it can be transformative. That's what I did. I took the rage and pain of being passed over, of being betrayed, of being made invisible, and I turned it into a career built on merit, into policies that make workplaces fairer, into opportunities for other women who might have ended up where I was. I'm not saying it was worth it. The cost was too high for that. The years of my marriage I can't get back. The stability Emma lost. The trust that was shattered. But I made something from it. I refused to let that betrayal be the end of my story. I made it the beginning of a better one. So if you're watching this, and you're in that meeting right now, watching someone less qualified get the promotion you earned, I want you to know, you have power. You have options. You have the ability to stand up and say this is not acceptable. It won't be easy. There will be costs, but there are also costs to staying silent, to accepting injustice, to letting merit be subordinated to politics and favoritism and abuse of power. Only you can decide which costs you're willing to bear. I made my choice. I fought back. I rebuilt. And I'd make the same choice again, despite everything it cost me. Because the alternative, staying in a system that didn't value me, accepting the scraps I was offered, teaching my daughter that women should be grateful for whatever crumbs fall from the table that wasn't an option I could live with. You have to decide what you can live with, what kind of example you want to set, what kind of world you want to help build. And if you decide to fight, if you decide that you deserve better, and you're willing to work for it, then I'm here to tell you, you can win. It's possible. I'm living proof. The systems aren't fair. The game is rigged. But it's not unbeatable. It just requires courage and strategy, and the willingness to burn it down and build something better in its place. I did it. You can too. If you've ever felt overlooked for a promotion you deserved, I want to hear from you. Like this video to show you're not alone in this fight. Subscribe for more stories of real people rebuilding their careers with integrity and refusing to accept systems that don't value merit. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that merit and ethics matter, that it's worth fighting for a workplace that values excellence over politics. Because we're building something better, one story at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. And that better world? It starts with us. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you deserve to be valued for your work. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.